Hello there and welcome to yet another edition of The Journal with me, Sean Thomas. Of course, we discuss many issues relating to the development of Antigua and Barbuda. And this week on The Journal, we're discussing education from the standpoint or from the views of the Director of Education here in Antigua and Barbuda. Education is seen as the tool used to empower our nation, empower people, and to change our society. Let me take an opportunity now to welcome the Director of Education, Ms. Jacintha Pringle. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Now, education on a whole in Antigua and Barbuda has been changing over the years. There has been many challenges. But I want to start the discussion off this evening by talking a bit about universal secondary education, which is the word on the street, and a lot of persons are still very ignorant as to what is universal secondary education and what does it mean for Antigua and Barbuda.
Okay. Universal secondary education, as you may know, comes into being in September this year. I just want to be very simple as possible. It will mean that every child who would have completed the grade 6, that is the last class in primary school, will automatically move on to secondary school. In other words, it's not going to be if they pass an exam to go. They will go. And there are the critics, of course, who are concerned about the quality, the final product that we will have when children transition automatically. Because some time ago in the 1970s, we had automatic transfer, and that was disastrous because we had a lot of children moving and they were not able to produce good work when they move over to secondary schools. Now, we have learned from that. And so it means that we will not have an examination that will be determining if children go. But certainly we will have what is called a national assessment to determine where children are placed. And what the ministry is going to do is to ensure that children are placed in classes so that they can reach their full potential. In other words, everybody is not going to be doing all academic work. Some children will be doing technical subjects, some of them will be doing academics plus technical subjects. Some of them will be doing a lot of skill subjects so that they can succeed one way or the other.
What about persons who would be of the view that you may just write off a child thinking that he's not academically inclined and would be best fit to do a hands-on type training? You might just miss one.
Well, see, that is why we are very careful. I am sure that you know, for example, of students who were late bloomers. In other words, in first and second forms, for example, they seemed to have been very slow. But sometimes they go to Form 3, for example, and something happens. It's as if then a light bulb comes on in their heads and they just take flight. So we know that there are late developers, and so we have to be very careful because we do not want to put children in any slot because sometimes you can do much damage. Yeah?
How do you plan to guard against that?
Well,
even with the best technicians?
Even with the best technicians. We have what is called profiles. You know, children will have profiles. In other words, their academic records will go with them to the schools, to the secondary schools to which they are going to be, in which they are going to be placed, sorry. And so teachers there will be able to know exactly what they are able to do. Personally, from what I'm seeing, there are going to be a lot of students who will be able to write CXC, and their subjects may not be academic subjects, but right now CXC has a large variety of subjects that children can choose from. We have, for example, we have in the performing arts, we have theater arts, we have music, you have art and craft, principles of business. I mean, sometimes you may think that principles of accounts, for example, has a lot of mathematics, and so they may want to shy away from that. But there are many, many subjects that children can choose that will allow them to become successful. And the ministry is also looking at the technical vocational area to assist, not area, but areas, to assist students. Because I think for a long time now, we have not really looked at the power of the technical vocational areas. But I'm saying that in a country, in a small developing country like ours, where employment is scarce these days, it is the vocational areas that will assist children in getting, in more or less creating employment for themselves and sometimes for their peers. And I'm just taking, for example, a basic example, clothing and textiles, for example. CXC has decided that it would be more attractive if you change the name to something like fashion and design, because right away it has some attraction to it. But it's easy for a student who likes to sew to begin to sew his own clothes.
And of course, with the name fashion and design, you start thinking big.
Yeah, you're thinking big. And then you were taking in clothing for people, and you're sewing, and you're designing your own clothing. And so it becomes like work for you. And if you're very good at what you are doing, you will get more clients. And so your business expands. And so you hire people to work for you. Okay. So that's a business. It becomes a business in itself. Still
with universal secondary education, now what will become of remedial education once we implement this universal secondary pass-through system?
All right. It is inevitable that you will have students who present who cannot read. Even now we have children who cannot read properly.
There are adults who cannot read properly.
Right. So the ministry would have to be cognizant of that, and these children would have to be taken and would be placed for remedial work. They have to be given remedial work to do. In other words, sometimes they may leave school not being able to do a lot, but at least they would be able to read. And that is very, very important. Because as you know, if you cannot read, you're not going to be able to do many, many, many other things.
Okay. So, in essence, then, there will not be a remedial type setting in schools anymore, or you're just going to assess children and then what would happen?
I'll really? Tell you.
Tell me exactly what would happen.
I'll tell you, with universal secondary education, each secondary school would have to be very careful as to what they do as far as remediation is concerned.
That's right.
It's very, very important that each secondary would have to look and see the students who would need extra assistance.
Don't you think that should be done before secondary level?
I'll tell you, some children need that extra assistance all the way up. All the way up. It's not, remediation sometimes does not help students at one time. It's just like children growing up. You have to be telling them all the time, don't do that, don't do that. It's so with academic work too. And I hasten to say that sometimes we dwell a lot on academic work, but school is not only about academic work. School is about helping the total being to become a productive citizen of Antigua and Barbuda, any country in which you live. So we're talking about behavior. We're talking about attitude and values and how you present yourself. Yeah?
Okay. Take a break. When we come back, we'll hear more from the Director of Education here in Antigua and Barbuda, Ms. Jacintha Pringle. You're watching The Journal. Stay with us. You are watching The Journal. You're watching The Journal with me, Sean Thomas. We've been talking about education here in Antigua and Barbuda. Now, Ms. Pringle, apart from universal secondary education, there is, of course, something called curriculum development sort of setting within the ministry, yes? Tell me a bit about that.
All right. Our curriculum development office is headed by the Assistant Director, Dr. Cynthia Crump Russell. She is responsible for all syllabuses or syllabi. She's responsible for the national curriculum. She looks over all the syllabi from CXC to ensure that our students are able to negotiate whatever is expected of them, and to assist parents of primary school students. Her unit has prepared past papers. Of course, when we used to do common entrance, that was, of course, you know, we did common entrance for the last time last year. But the examination, the national assessment will basically, it may take on a different form, but it is the same work that the students are doing, because the syllabus or the syllabi, because we're talking about
several:
language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. In essence, those have not changed. So it's really the same material. And she has prepared the syllabi for parents to purchase at a very small cost so that they can work with their children. And so it's not only the parents, but teachers can obtain these syllabi at a very small cost.
Is the public aware of this?
Well, they should. They should, because parents come in every day.
I've heard complaints that teachers in, for example, NTTC are not very happy with the way the syllabus is set up in comparison to what the textbook offers them to teach. Any work is being done there to sort of harmonize or to bridge that divide?
Yes, the ministry is looking at that. I mean, we have, let me just say, we have students who are very special at the NTTC. And probably, I'm saying probably, when that school was set up, we did not expect it to have become what it is today. And so next academic year, we have plans to more or less fine-tune a lot of things that happen at the National Technical Training Center.
What are these things?
For example, we believe that some students should not be doing so many subjects presently. I do believe that there are some students who need not do so many subjects. For example, if you give them a small number of subjects, chances are they perform better at the small number that they can do. Another thing is that we would probably have to look at the staff that are sent there. You see, everybody is not able to deal with certain kinds of students. You must be dedicated, you must have a lot of patience, and you must be able to want to help the students that you are going to work with. And if indeed we are serious that when we move towards universal secondary education, that what we are really doing is to ensure that all students are able to perform well in whatever they can do, then the ministry has to ensure that when teachers are chosen for certain institutions, they are well chosen.
How do you plan to identify these special teachers?
We already know who they are. We know the persons who are very, very committed. You know, we know the persons who can endure and endure. We know the persons who work well with students. And sometimes we look towards the more experienced teachers, but that is not always the case. From my experience, we have some new teachers, some very new young dynamic persons who have just come into the system, but already you can see they were born to teach because they have the fire in them and they are prepared to help.
Is the education system in Antigua and Barbuda currently ready to keep that fire going with all the challenges, working conditions, salaries, name it?
You see, you mentioned salaries, and that is something that I can talk about that in two ways. I think it's important that you pay people well for the services that they offer. I think that will motivate them. If you pay people well, of course, it gives them the impetus to do better. But I'll tell you that in the teaching profession, money is not the be-all and end-all. And anybody who's a good teacher is not in it for the money. It is for money. But of course, it is the happiness that you feel when you see a child that you would have taught at some point come into his own, his or her own, and you know, can produce. And, you know, they are making it in life. That gives you quite a measure of, well, pleasure, not money. I'm not saying that money is not important, but if you are a good teacher, you are looking for more than money. You just want children to produce. And I want to go further by saying, you asked me if I think it can happen. It must happen. That is what education is about. Education is about changing the human condition. And in Antigua and Barbuda, I would say most of us are poor people. And so children must be taught by teachers in the classroom that education is the only thing that will take them out from where they are and to give them the opportunity to earn a living, to make their parents proud of them, to be able to help their parents, to be able to help Antigua and Barbuda develop, because that is why we are moving towards universal secondary. Students are going to have more opportunities open to them if they get a secondary school education. They will be able to help develop Antigua more. They will be able to contribute more to nation building if they have a secondary school education. And another thing that is becoming quite possible or popular is tertiary education. You can go so much further if you are able to go to university. We're talking about competition. We're talking about the global market. Our students must be able to compete with others for jobs. When jobs are advertised regionally, they should be able to apply for those jobs. But they will not get the jobs if they don't have paper qualifications. And more so, I always go further than paper qualifications, because some people have paper qualifications, but they do not have the right attitudes and poor work ethic.
This is seen across the government system.
I'm telling you, we have to change that. And it is unfortunate that that should happen, because every time a person is getting the opportunity to get a degree, it's more than just a degree. You see, we expect so much from you. Unfortunately, some employers, they complain that students come to them not being ready for the workplace, coming late to work. And that is why we speak to teachers all the time about going to school late. It is important that when you are teaching children, it's not only knowledge that you are imparting. They're looking at everything. They're looking at your whole person, your whole carriage. And so it is not only being able to teach history, for example, well, but they look at you at the time you come to school. Children can tell you who is always late. You know, they look at you at the time you enter the classroom. Are you always early for classes and so on, if you know the content of your material? And so that is why the ministry more or less puts a lot of emphasis on lesson planning. Make sure that when you go to your classes, you have planned for your lessons, so you are prepared.
That hinges on accountability as well.
Of course, and of course, if you are not ready for the class, if you have not planned, you waste a lot of time in the classroom.
And of course, it's more difficult to get children to settle down.
Of course, and you do not engage them, and that is where you have probably fights breaking out and all kinds of things. Because when you plan your lessons, it's so tight that you are engaging those children for the 70 minutes or whatever time you have in the classroom.
Can students now be more relaxed, knowing fully well that they're going through the primary system and onto the secondary education system without common entrance, quote unquote?
That would be unfortunate if they relax their efforts. They cannot afford to. Yes, they will move, but how they move depends on their performance.
Over 5 years?
Yes, yes. And so they must perform well for them to be placed. You understand? All children will move, yes. But remember, and I want to say to students, it is your future. And you need to work. And even for adults, nothing comes easy in life. You must perform well. But what will happen is that with the transition, automatic transition, if you want to call it that, because you said if children will be able to just be relaxed because they are moving nonetheless, they come with their profiles. And the profiles are going to be very important. Because unlike common entrance, where you had to write an examination and that determined whether or not you went to secondary school, these children are getting an opportunity with their profiles. Teachers will look at that in instances where, for example, somebody died in the family, so that the national assessment, when it is written, even if that would have some impact on their performance, the profiles would help teachers to place them. Yeah?
Okay. You're watching The Journal. When we come back, we'll talk more about nutrition and education and that whole question of investment in education. Send us an email at thejournalantigua@gmail.com. Also, view this episode on Facebook or on YouTube. You're watching The Journal. Welcome back. We're discussing education. Antigua and Barbuda has implemented the school meals program. And of course, many children come to school for one reason or the other. They may not want to accept the school meals program. But how important is education, or in fact, nutrition to education?
That cannot be emphasized enough. Most naturally, children who come to school hungry, they cannot perform. Sean, if you are hungry, you know what I mean, you know what happens. Your belly is growling. You cannot think because you are hungry. But when children are properly fed, they can come to school and they can concentrate on what the teacher is saying to them. You know, the knowledge that is being imparted. And that is very, very important, especially at the primary school level. And I mean, the schools are saying now that a lot of children, you know, children who tended to be tardy, or they were not not punctual. I don't want to say punctual. They were not very frequent at coming to school. They are now there. And let's face it, it's only normal. If you are a poor mother, if you didn't have food to give your children, chances are probably you would have kept them home for the day. But now that you know that there are the school meals, of course, I mean, you know that, I mean, at least they will be getting lunch during the lunch break. So you don't really have that to worry about. A lot of things have changed from when I was a young teacher. Let's take the textbooks, the school textbooks that are being provided now. Yes, we pay an education levy, but it's not so much, is it? But no, children are getting their textbooks free. When I was in the classroom, I can remember when, as a school teacher, if I had 25 students, probably about 10 of them would have their textbooks because their parents were able to buy the textbooks.
Well, what do you say to children or to people who just do not care these textbooks because they're free, nobody has to work for them?
Well, I tell you, we have a culture here in Antigua Barbuda where when things are provided to us very freely, we tend to take them for granted, and that is why the children, sometimes you go and they leave their books in their desks overnight and so on. But that has to do with parenting. You know, it behoves every parent to make sure that these texts are well taken care of, because again, they have to pay. When the books are destroyed, they have to pay. So it depends on the parents. But sometimes when we get things for granted, when we get things free, we take them for granted. I'm telling you, we see a lot of changes. We now have school meals. We now have free textbooks. We are now getting our uniforms for free. To me, sometimes I ask myself, what is it that is preventing children from performing? Because things are much better now than years of yore, when I went to school, for example.
What are the things that could be preventing children from performing well? Is just the influx of young teachers. The patience isn't there.
Influx of young teachers?
Do you subscribe to that?
No, Sean, not at all. Probably, and we are speaking frankly, probably. But that cannot be the only thing. I do believe that sometimes we have home problems. Sometimes we have parents who do not care enough. Some parents who are so busy making two ends meet that it's from one job to the other, and they don't really take the time to ensure that their children are doing homework and so on, and so the children are raising themselves. Sometimes it's all the technological gadgets that we give them, the television. Some children like a lot of television. I used to say to my children, listen to me, these people already make their big money already. You need an education. Sometimes it's a matter of not thinking, and children are smart. Sometimes they do not think that their parents care enough, so that there is nothing to work for. And that is why it is so important that even parents who are not very literate pretend, you know, they can pretend that they know.
They know exactly how to.
What is happening. You understand? Some children don't really know that their parents can't read, you know, because the mother is going to say, but why you didn't get that right, you know? And you goad them on into doing well all the time.
I want to touch here on the management of the school plans. You mentioned the issues of parents not being able to read. I mean, it's, of course, everybody at one time or another should have access to education. Yeah. But, and then you can say, well, the teachers might be responsible, of course. Of course, there are a lot of people who all contribute to making education work. Yeah. How effective is it for school plans to be, or how important is it for school plans to be effectively managed to sort of ensure that once you go through the system, you can function well in society, you can read, you can reason, and things like that?
Well, I tell you, leadership is very important on any school's compound. Principal is the move and shake of things.
The principal?
The principal. Once you have a very good principal, a lot of things can happen. The principal must be able to manage his or her staff well. In other words, they know what the person stands for. This whole business of regularity and punctuality, and teachers must be in place, and their lesson plans must be there, and so on. You have that, but you see, the principal, I must say, cannot do it alone. He or she is given a team of persons to work with, and so that's why you have teachers. In every classroom on the school compound, things must be happening. Teachers must be teaching, they must be engaging children. And of course, as I said before, it is not only schoolwork. So all teachers in the school, in any school, must ensure that children are properly clad. Their hair is well combed. That's something that sometimes we don't look to. The children should not look disheveled. They should be clean. Their fingernails are to be clean, just as in days of yore, because all of that is hygiene.
But of course, you have to understand, Ms. Pringle, teachers also have their moods. Teachers have problems at home as well, just like children do. And so their ability to ensure that these things happen could be hampered because they've got their personal lives as well. So who monitors these teachers?
I'll tell you. I think, Sean, that you know that no matter what kind of problem you have at home, when you come to work, you leave that at home. You come to work. And when you come to work, it is demanded of you that you take care of the business at your workplace. And so the children become your business at work. Of course, everybody, all of us, we have problems. You can't bring your problems into the classroom. You understand? You come to work. Suppose you brought your problems here. You think you would be here? It cannot happen. So we have to take responsibility.
And so teachers need to be better disciplined, more or less, because you find classrooms that are very slack.
Of course, and that ought not to be. That ought not to be.
How would you call for greater discipline on the part of principals and teachers to ensure that the school plans functions properly?
I'll say that it is important, it is very important that principals are able to speak their minds. I think that even in society, a lot of people are not able to say to people, look, you're wrong. And so the principal must be able to call a teacher, you did something wrong, and I don't want it to happen again. But there are some people who would prefer to just say in a staff meeting together, you know, you lump everybody together and talk about a problem that is happening instead of facing the person, facing the culprits. It's very important that you are able to do that because you are the supervisor of the plant. And it's not that we're not looking for friends then. Too many people are, you know, they are not able to speak their minds because they want people to be their friends. My mother used to say there is no friendship in business. So you say what you have to say. And, well, I don't want to say who begs dead, but if you want to be angry with me because I speak to you about a particular thing that you are not doing right, well, so be it. But my conscience is clear because I would have done what I knew I had to do.
And so we can move on with the business of the school, as you put it.
Of course.
Now, the question of management. Of course, you mentioned principals are responsible for teachers, teachers responsible for children.
Yes.
But of course, a principal has maybe some cases 600, 700 students, plus teachers who some are not very disciplined, teachers. So do you think that schools should be run by boards, maybe boards set up to run schools? Boards
of management are very important. The Education Act of 2008 that came into being in 2009 speaks to boards of management, and certainly they would help the principals on, with the work, the amount of work that they have to do on the school's compound, and probably the principals can go back to being instructional leaders, the teaching and learning part of it.
Which is what you're advocating for?
Yes, all schools really, all school principals should be. Schools are about teaching and learning, and when you have a lot of things to do, bathrooms not working, all kinds of things, those take away from what you really should be concentrating on.
Since 2008 to now, why not yet? What's the focus?
A lot of things, a lot of things. There are lots of things in education, you know, that need to be put right. And so this year we are trying to do universal secondary, and then when we would have gotten that, then we can move to something else. Probably we can begin to look at boards in secondary schools to start with, because they are larger.
How long you anticipate it will take for this whole universal secondary education thing to be properly implemented?
I like the word properly, because countries that have more or less started universal secondary education, they have had their problems. What Dominica did, for example, Dominica built a whole heap of secondary schools with some money that they got, and they just moved. Notice Antigua took it step by step. We were careful not to just do it en masse at one time. We took it step by step. First of all, what we did, little by little, we closed down our junior secondaries.
Let me stop you here just to ask you. You said Antigua is doing it step by step. Now,
we did it. We're now going totally
more or less. But would you say, and I've been hearing on the street from teachers, from people in education, that the quote-unquote post-primary type setting, the junior secondary school settings are not quite fitting for secondary type education. Do you subscribe to this?
I don't.
Why not?
I don't at all, because the junior secondary type classes, I think they had their time, but if we are moving towards universal secondary, schools must either be primary or secondary. We can no longer have junior secondaries. Junior secondaries came into vogue when children did not pass the common entrance in grade 6, and because they couldn't enter Form 1, they went into what was called grade 7. And then we had the grade 8 and the grade 9, and when you got to grade 9, you wrote an examination, and if you passed it, you entered Form 3. Now, there's no more need for that, because we're moving towards universal. Everybody is going. You know, it's not a matter of failing or passing. Everybody will go. Yeah? All
right. You're watching The Journal. When we come back, some more discussion on the whole issue of education development for. You are watching The Journal. Welcome back to The Journal. We're discussing education here in Antigua and Barbuda from the views of the Director for Education in this Twin Island state. Now, Ms. Pringle, in education, we've been faced with the challenge of math and education, low passes, not as we would like to see it. What's the problem?
And we are not proud at all. That is an agonizing thing for the Ministry of Education. You would have heard when the results came out last year, 2012, and the mathematics results were so poor. The Minister of Education certainly gave us a mandate to do something about this. And a number of things are being done, and certainly over time you will see changes. But we only had 1 year to fix or to make a difference in this year's results, hopefully. So what we did is that last term, at the end of last term, we had a boot camp for teachers, the 4th and 5th form teachers, math teachers. In other words, we feel that it was important to bring all of them together and let them go through the CXC mathematics paper. Because we are convinced that it is not all teachers who are very good in all the areas. So the boot camp was aimed at helping everybody. Those who do not know how to teach certain concepts, those who know how to teach certain concepts, more or less help the others.
Who might not be so strong.
Right, who were not so strong.
Did that work, or is that working?
Well, I'll tell you, it's difficult to say. It's something that we just did this past December. And what we are going to do with the 5th formers is that we are bringing them to the multipurpose center somewhere around 18th, 19th, and 20th. I don't know if I have the dates, but it's 3 days. And we are going to do the same thing with them. the experts will be teaching certain concepts. And we are aware that we have over 900 plus performers. So we are dividing them into 3 groups. Different groups will come on different days. Yeah? And they will go through the math papers. Hopefully, we are hoping that they will be able to negotiate or do better this coming May, June.
And that's just one step.
That's only one thing.
Any other?
Yes. What we are hoping to do is that we have a memorandum of understanding that we are going to be signing with the University of the Virgin Islands. And we have already more or less identified some of our good, promising math teachers, young math teachers, and we are going to be granting them scholarships to do a full math degree. Those who are advanced already, 1 or 2 of them will go on to do a master's in mathematics. That's another initiative we have in mind. And certainly this year we are hoping that we can offer scholarships through the Board of Education to persons who want to do mathematics.
They've said that some teachers get the opportunity to further education while others don't, through sort of grapevine type of thing. Is this something you're hoping to deal with?
I don't know about grapevine, really. I think people apply, and certainly I sit on the National Scholarship Committee, and when teachers apply and I know that they are good for the education system, I always try my best to ensure that they get the opportunity at a scholarship. I don't know about grapevine and that kind of thing.
We're wrapping up this edition of the Journal. I want to talk briefly about violence in school. What should happen if a teacher should slap a child or discipline a child in the most unpleasant manner? What would the Ministry or Board of Education, or should I say the Ministry of Education, do in a situation like that?
I tell you, we have
because
what is
we've had
called,
cases before, haven't we?
We have an initiative called a Child Friendly School Initiative. What we want to more or less create on every school's compound, and we have started in the primary schools because we needed to start with little people, small children who tend to be very afraid and so on. We want them to be assured that school is a friendly place so that when they leave their parents' homes, they can feel comfortable. And so we are asking teachers to be more friendly and accommodating. And certainly children too need to be responsible. You know, they must have respect, they must be responsible, they must be trustful and so on. They don't steal on the school's compound from others, so they, you know, there must always be honesty. But at the same time, we expect our teachers to be respectful of children too.
And that is important if you want a child to speak out.
Very, and no longer, and I want to say this, no longer is there this feeling, or should there be this feeling, that I am teacher and I can say or do what I want. You are going to be held accountable. So that, no, teachers are not supposed to slap children. I'll tell you this. It's against, it speaks to that in the Education Act. You're not supposed to beat. The only person who beats on the school's compound is the principal. What we are trying to do with this, in the school friendly initiative, is to do away with corporal punishment, so that children do not feel fearful that if they don't do something to the teacher's liking, that they are going to be beaten.
But you cannot put the belt down. You agree with that?
Well, I'll tell you.
Beating works. A good old
If
beating.
you ask me my personal opinion, I do believe that some children, they need to be beaten, or the belt works for them. They're fearful and so they're going to do the right thing. But we are hoping that eventually, even that, we would not have to do. I think sometimes it is a slavery mentality that we do something if we know that we are going to be punished. And I just wish that it didn't have to be that way, that you do what you know you have to do because you have to do it.
It's very similar. Some children only work when they know the papers are being marked.
Well, that is true, and I do think that the papers should be marked all the time, every time. And teachers who just say, do this work just so to while away the time, they need to realize that that is not engaging children, and certainly children should be able to get feedback as soon as possible. So when you give a test and you give them work to do, let them get feedback as soon as possible so they know what they did. And that is a sin, basically, amongst teachers, to just give children work to do and not mark the papers. It's wrong, very wrong.
All right. In the defense of the teachers, they might have so much they need to get through in the curriculum, and so they would want to give the child the work to just quiz them or to test them, but not necessarily for the mark to go towards the end of year, end of term grades.
Nothing is wrong with giving quizzes. Nothing is wrong with giving you know, oral things. I mean, you're asking questions just to see who knows, who doesn't know, that kind of thing. Nothing is wrong. We did that when we went to school. But the fact is, children need to be given feedback quickly.
I remember when I was going to school, there was something called mental ability.
Ah, yes.
And so...
And that is something that is quickly dying. But again, and that is another initiative that we are taking with the mathematics. In primary school, teachers need to spend some time on mental arithmetic. Let children count in their heads, you know, because very basic things they don't know. You know, if you add 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25, what is that? They know that there are 4 25 cents in a dollar. These things they must know quickly.
And I think, as you mentioned that as well, I mean, gone are the days more or less when classrooms would be filled with posters and, you know, subject-verb agreement, and of course the actual bringing a cake into a classroom and sharing it amongst the children to show them.
And you know, Sean, you mentioned subject-verb agreement, and I need to say this because you asked me about English, and just on Wednesday, my registrar, the examination officer, told me that for this January, the January sitting, the results are in, and the results for English, they are poorer than the math results. And I'm asking myself, since when we are going down in English? Before we did not have a problem in English.
Then something is wrong.
Yeah, something is wrong, very wrong. And I'm going to say that I'm always one who believes that the dialect works against you. There are some people who say dialect is our culture. I am saying plenty other things in Antigua are part of our culture. It cannot be just the dialect. Because you know that you are writing an English exam, it is important that you practice to speak properly. And we just spoke on Wednesday at our meeting about the way in which our people tend to switch. We use the subject-verb agreement. Our subject and verb don't agree at all, at all, at all. And you see that not only in schools, but you see it amongst our people, our people in the population, and you see that when you in the news, when people are being interviewed, they just switch. So you're talking about one person, then you go back to say they instead of he or she. You know, it's very important that we, English becomes something. I'm talking about standard English becomes something that we pay attention to.
We're wrapping up. You're watching The Journal. In just a bit, we'll have that important discussion. Welcome back. Welcome back to The Journal. I'm Sean Thomas. We're discussing education, and of course, education is faced with many, many challenges. One of those has to do with violence in schools, and of course, the issue of sex in schools. We're now seeing it on just about every screen, mobile phones. Persons are, showing you these things as if to say it's commonplace in our society. Ms. Pringle, what's the aggressive approach to dealing with the issue of sex in schools?
I don't know if we want to
taken by the Ministry of Education. I
don't know if we want to take an aggressive approach, but certainly we want children to understand That is about them, eh? It's about them, and it's about your reputation. It's about us living in a world, in a society where decency and morality must be observed. And so there are certain things that are just not kosher. I don't like the word aggressive for the simple reason that with children who are presenting with behaviors that we do not like, it is better if they are properly counseled.
But you cannot not be aggressive towards something that is unwanted.
When you say aggressive, what exactly are you thinking about?
A hands-on approach. Going into the schools, the Ministry of Education, launching out a team of individuals from, let's say, somebody from IT, somebody from education, somebody from the cloth. I know that persons don't like to hear the cloth, but ministry, government, well, pastors, going out into the schools. Somebody, of course, from the information and technology era or department or ministry, letting them know of the dangers that can happen. I mean, after leaving school, these videos are everywhere. They can be used against you. The morality of it and things like that.
I'm sure
somebody from HIV/AIDS unit.
All of these people already are in schools.
But that's not working, is it?
Pastors, priests, HIV, the Ministry of Education, teachers, because they are learning all of that in health and family life education. Eh? And I know that teachers make it their business to talk about sex and let children know the dangers. But sometimes it's, I would say it has to do with the individual and the environment in which children live. Because I'll tell you, children learn from example. You know that?
I agree.
And a lot of children, they're not seeing, you know, they're not seeing good examples, you know, at the home.
Where they live, at home in the community.
You see?
Ms. Pringle, as Director of Education, where would you like to see education go? Do you have a 5-year strategic plan of such?
All right. Our 5-year plan models, or we are modeling our 5-year plan on what the OECS has. We are modeling their theme. Every learner achieves, every learner learns. And that is why we are thinking in terms of doing something more for, not something, but doing more for children with special needs. If we say every learner achieves, we have to think in terms of children with disabilities. Later this year, the government will refurbish a building at the entity on Nugent Avenue that is going to be become the diagnostic center where children with disabilities, learning disabilities, will be screened so that we know exactly what is their problem, so that we will be able to teach them properly. I told you earlier that schools are about teaching and learning. You cannot do much in schools if you don't have good teachers. You would have heard the Minister of Education, Jackie Quinn-Leandro, say that she wanted all teachers to be trained by September 2013. Unfortunately, we didn't meet that mark. What we did is that we try our best to train more teachers, and I can tell you that more have been trained. But
are you looking at degree trained or?
No, teacher trained.
Teacher trained.
In other words,
okay.
You are trained in pedagogy. You have the content, but you need to know how you're going to transmit that knowledge to the children. A lot of people have content, but they don't know how to teach. So when I say teacher trained, you are trained in transmitting
pedagogy.
The knowledge. Yes? We still have plenty of teachers to train, and that is why a facility is being prepared for teacher training.
There needs to be a strategy as to how you determine who gets to teach.
Who gets to teach. That is true. But we do screen persons when they apply for teaching. Of course, some people fall by the cracks because when they come to you, they're filled with a lot of fervor. I always wanted to teach. You know, I know that I can be a good teacher, and 5 years down the line, you're seeing them presenting in with a different kind of thing, or they even ask to come out of the teaching profession because that is not what they really wanted to do. Although 5 years ago they told you that, you know, they were burning with desire to teach. But those things happen. Huh? So we are training more teachers. We are trying to see how best we can start the foundation with early childhood, because we do believe that if we get our children early to understand how important education is, they become better students in the primary and certainly in the secondary schools. You would have heard that we want to open 3 new preschool classes. We have already gotten help from the Millreef Club of Antigua and Barbuda, who gave us some $25,000 to acquire preschool materials, and we are in the process of more or less acquiring those, and we will just open, at least we're going to stagger the opening of those classes. We will open at least 1 or 2 preschool classes at the Villa Primary in March next month.
Okay, March of 2013.
Yes.
Are you satisfied with the investment that you're seeing in education?
I'll tell you what, the board does a lot for us, a lot, probably more than we could have asked for, you know, plenty. We could not survive without the Board of Education. The Arthur Trust Fund, they have opened a lot of, they have bought a lot of school resources for children, slow learners, and they've taught children to read. The Dyslexia Association does a lot with teaching children to read. The Millreef Trust Fund has helped from time immemorial, and they used to give scholarships, but now they're helping. We would like to see corporate citizens invest more in education because the human resources, that's all we have. Unfortunately, many people would prefer to sponsor a queen for $40,000 than giving help to the Ministry of Education, and that is very, very sad. But certainly, we would like more persons to invest in education because that is all we have. It is such an important sector.
Final comments, where would you like to see education go?
I would like all children in Antigua and Barbuda to get a chance at doing well, doing very well, so that they can take themselves out of the mire in which they may be and to become productive citizens in Antigua Barbuda. I think that I am very passionate about education for poor children simply because I know where I am coming from and know that it was education that has helped me to where I am today. It is important, though, that children recognize that there is need for them to be ambitious. The more ambitious you are, it is the further that you are going to get in life. Nothing comes easy, you have to work hard. And in school, you have to work hard so that you can be successful.
That's all the time we've got on the Journal. We've been talking to the Director of Education here in Antigua and Barbuda, Miss Jacintha Pringle. That's all the time we've got. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you very much, Sean.
A
pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. That's all for now. Remember, you can view us on Facebook, also on YouTube, and send us an email at thejournalantigua@.